Is my mic working? Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. Lovely. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever VC question time at the University of Kent. I really appreciate you guys all being here. And for everyone watching online as well, I really appreciate you tuning in. We've received quite a few pre submitted questions as well. I'm just going to run through the layout of this event first, some housekeeping rules, and then we'll get straight into it. Firstly, this event is coming through the work that we've been doing around our student priority of transparency and decision making, which is really, really important because students want to see the transparency from Kent Union, but also from university management around what's going on at the University of Kent. So, the Vice-Chancellor Karen Cox has agreed to come on this open forum to get questions directly from students and answer them directly to get a sense of transparency, but also a moment of accountability as well, which is really important for all Kent students. Now, the layout of this event will be that we will start off with the pre-submitted questions, and we have about a maximum of 40 minutes for that. So we'll go through the pre-submitted questions. As I said, we've received quite a few of them. So the questions that we won't be able to answer today, we'll get the answers directly from Karen and put them up on a blog post on the University of Kent website and the Kent Union website. So those answers will be published later on. We will then move on to a round of audience questions where we will have our lovely officer team members, so Tom and Ben on either side of the stage, who will go with their roaming mics and pass over the mics for questions to be asked. Now, in terms of housekeeping, it's really important to maintain a respectful conversation here. We want to maintain a sense of accountability, but we don't need conversations to get directly targeted at people. We don't want it to get personal. We just want answers and a productive conversation between the Vice Chancellor and the students directly. And I'm here to facilitate that. I will be asking the questions. We'll make sure that they're, worded correctly. But if, we do reach a point where students or anyone is calling out staff by name or um, being disrespectful, we will have to ask you to leave because this is not the space for that. The space is meant to be a space where we are trying to be productive. We're trying to have direct conversations and really get answers for all students at Kent. So please do bear that in mind. Um, and I would really appreciate you sticking to those rules. Really, genuinely, we want it to be productive. We want it to be respectful. So we'll get straight into it. Hello to everyone watching live on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for joining. As people join in, we'll in person as well. We'll get them to grab a seat. Um, and the lights will come on for the audience questions, I promise. We thought this would be a lot easier to see this way. So we'll get straight into it. I will pass it over to our Vice Chancellor Karen Cox to introduce herself firstly, and then I'll get into the first question.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Zaid, for inviting me to the forum this afternoon. As you and I have met on numerous occasions, we have opportunities to talk through issues, to be able to you challenge me challenge you, all of those really important things that are part of what being both the Vice-Chancellor and also Kent Union President are about. Yeah. And I'm very grateful and thankful to you and your team for the way that you do engage on those issues, and also for the challenge that you put back to myself and my colleagues as well. So very happy to be involved and engaged. This is an opportunity, as you say, to widen that out. Mm-hmm. I will do my very best to answer questions, and where there are things I don't know or I'm not able to answer, then I think, as you said, we'll be able to follow up so that we can make sure we've got information going out to students that they want to know about in ways that they want. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So we'll get straight into it. The first question, just to get a sense of what being Vice-Chancellor is. So what does your role as Vice-Chancellor entail? What does that mean for the university, and how are decisions made at the university? So if you can provide a brief overview of the governance of the university.
Yeah, the title Vice-Chancellor is a strange one, isn't it? Because it doesn't leave you really understanding what it is at all. And in fact, for those of you who may know me a little bit, I'm also come from a nursing background, so I'm also a registered nurse. So sometimes it's easy to say I'm a registered nurse and then a Vice-Chancellor, because people understand what the registered nurse bit is, but they don't necessarily understand the Vice-Chancellor. that's my parents' view of the world anyway. So Vice-Chancellor is, in effect, the chief executive of the organisation. And the role itself is very much therefore associated with the kinds of things that chief executives do. But I'll just explain a little bit in more detail if that's helpful. So there are, I see it as and describe it as having two elements to it primarily. There's the external facing activity and then there's the internal facing activity. So in terms of the external facing activity, as Vice-Chancellor, you're responsible for and accountable for the organisation. So this university is approximately £260 million turnover. We've got tens of thousands of students and thousands of staff. So significant organisation and significant in terms of its role and purpose within the region as well as within national higher education. And so I am the accountable person and the representative externally. So that primarily would be with government. Mm-hmm. It would be with the Office for Students, so our regulator. It would be with our local MPs, with our city and county councils, so local and regional stakeholders as well as the national activity. And then in terms of the role within the university, my role is to work with the governing body to set the strategic direction for the university, to make decisions about the university in terms of its activity, where it will put its resources, the kind of university that we're striving to be. And then I will also use that work and working with the governing body, and you yourself sit on the governing body, Zaid. Yeah. It's a nice mix of lay members, staff and students, but working then with the executive team and other senior leaders within the university, and then with staff and student leaders to put that strategy into action. Mm-hmm. And that would be through focusing on our activity in education and student experience. So what kind of education are we looking at offering? How do we best deliver that with the resources that we have? How do we manage a changing landscape externally in terms of what students are looking to study, how they're looking to study? How do we translate that to the courses we offer, the way that we offer them? Mm-hmm. And then also the student support that people want whilst they're studying with us. The other area of work and strategy is around research and innovation. So the university has a significant amount of research that goes on that is also informing and infusing our education programmes. And that's one of the ways in which we are an institution that's about knowledge generation and knowledge dissemination as well through those education programmes. But also that research is about addressing not just regional challenges, but also global challenges as well. So it's also a way that the university identifies what it stands for and what it's doing. Mm-hmm. And then the other area is around civic engagement and looking at how we work with our local stakeholders and communities, how we open up the university's resources, how we work with regional businesses, how we work with regional public sector bodies, how we work with civic and civil society to make sure that the university is playing its part, whether that's the work we do with schools and colleges, whether it's the work that we do with local councils, just really making sure that the university is playing its part in terms of the public good that it's about, but also that we're able to work with those partners in order to make sure we've got resources coming into the region as well, because that then helps the university, its staff and its students. So I see that as a bit more of a symbiotic relationship where if the university is thriving, then that helps the region. If the region's thriving, that helps the university. And the best way to do that is to do it together. Yeah. So I hope there's a sense of what I'm doing. There's also the events, and so things like this, working across the city as well in terms of public events, and again being an ambassador for the university, not just locally but nationally and internationally as well.
100%. Thank you so much for that overview.
No,
really appreciate it. And just to highlight as well, the governing body is University Council, and myself and our Vice President of Postgraduate Experience sit on University Council alongside an elected student member as well. So there's 3 students on University Council, so we have direct insight and a say in the decisions being made on the governing body, and they're the people that are holding the executive group accountable as well. So just wanted to highlight that. So we'll get straight into the questions that have
Okay.
come through. Um, Firstly, the first question I have is there's a question that says, I don't meet the threshold to get external help for meals. Why do we not have more microwaves around campus?
Okay. Um, so I'm not quite sure what the reference is to threshold for support, but I'm wondering if it means that this particular person asking the question is not able to access particular loans and grants
Mhm.
or financial support because they don't meet particular criteria.
Yes.
So I obviously that's where it's coming from. Um, and of course, I think it's reflecting a wider challenge, isn't it, around cost of living, increasing challenges for our students, if we focus on our students this afternoon, in terms of the fact that, for example, maintenance loans and grants haven't kept pace, or increases there haven't kept pace with inflation. And therefore, it's increasingly difficult for students to manage both their rents and cost of living generally in terms of food and heating and all of those things. So absolutely recognise that there are some challenges there for students. I think one of the ways that we've been trying to address that, and I'll come on to the microwaves in a moment, is working with yourselves around how can the university and Kent Union be providing affordable, sustainable and accessible food. And you've been fantastic at doing a lot of work around that and the breakfast clubs. We're working with our catering supply and colleagues here in the university in catering to look at how can we provide affordable meal deals. And then how can we look at what we can provide through our catering outlets that is affordable and sustainable, but also supporting students to be able to access and obtain food in a way that's also about supporting a social activity and sense of community. We've been asked questions before about microwaves around campus. And I think what we've been trying to do is make sure that there are locations for students to be able to not have to always feel they have to buy food in a space where they're wanting to maybe sit and be social or study. So I think there's more that we can do there. We can absolutely take that away. But again, I think if Kent Union have got any suggestions about how we might do that better, because it's not just necessarily access to microwaves. It's making sure in our accommodation that kitchens are appropriate and that there's enough facilities there for those students that are staying on campus, for those students that are commuting into campus. How can we make sure that there are, again, affordable options and places where you can get hot water, for example, to make a drink?
100%.
So all of those things, I think we've been doing some work on, but where we can do more, we absolutely will.
100%. We'll be, in the back of this question, we've actually been doing a lot of work on finding spaces on campus that are considered warm spaces that have microwaves, hot taps.
Yeah.
So we've released a map, but we found more spaces, so we're going to be
All
filling
right.
them
Okay.
up.
Great.
And we'll be releasing a video soon of all the spaces on campus with microwaves, but also places in Medway as well that have microwaves and hot taps as well. It is an increasing worry for people bringing in food, so there's a lot more work to be done there.
Yeah.
And we'll any feedback that students have around where they think a microwave would be best placed on campus, please let us know so we can push for that as well and find a sustainable way to implement that.
Great.
Thank you. So moving on, there's a question around exams. Now, the law school reintroduced in-person exams. This came as a surprise to students as we were told this wouldn't be the case. How did this decision come about and why weren't students made aware of these changes?
Okay. So I think, first of all, if there's been any confusion or something's been surprising, then of course we would want to make sure we address that. So I'm absolutely certain that if it's been raised within the law school, that it will absolutely be being addressed by those colleagues who are in those relevant roles in the law school. I think the challenge, of course, is for many of our students, and the experiences they've had very recently have been driven by COVID, and so there was a move to online examinations. And I would imagine for some students, that's the main experience they've had about taking a formal examination is it's been online. There are things that we have to do as a university around quality and standards that we have to make sure we are delivering our assessments in an appropriate and authentic way, and that we do continue to maintain those standards. That is an academic decision, and those academic leaders in those schools and divisions will be making those decisions about whether something is online, whether it's face to face or in an invigilated exam room, whether it is a formal assessment, a summative assessment. There'll be different things that they're having to think about all the time. So if they've made a decision to do some things back in a face to face way, then there will be a decent rationale behind that. The role then that we have to have is making sure that we are supporting students to manage exams. And I know that exams can be an incredibly stressful time. I know that colleagues in our schools and divisions do offer help and support in terms of preparing for exams. I know there's I can't remember what it's called now. There's a sort of you can do a test run on what it's like to take
exam chambers.
Exam chamber.
Yes.
That was it. I came across that the other day. I was thinking, crikey, what's this? It's a torture chamber or something. So I think and our student support and welfare teams are well aware of the stresses that examination time raises. There are things that we make sure are in place in terms of how to manage time, how to get prepared, how to kind of work with each other to try and de-stress or to revise, and then how to approach an examination. So all of these are really important skills as well in terms of learning how to deal with those stresses. We don't, of course, want to overburden students, but we also want to make sure that we've got appropriate ways of assessing the knowledge and all of the work that people put into their study and ultimately their degree outcomes. 100%. So I recognise when things change, it can be ovulating, but we need to manage people to help people manage through that change as well.
Definitely. So just to clarify, a lot of these decisions are out of the hands of the universities, mainly the regulating bodies as well, that require that some exams.
Yes, there are also requirements that external accrediting bodies will have on organisations. So they will be saying these are the parameters we set about whether it's content that needs to be examined, whether it's thresholds for what's a pass or a fail, whether it's the way that those examinations need to be run. But all of those things have to be taken into account. So there's our internal quality assessments and thresholds that are reflective of what our regulatory bodies and the quality assurance agencies are telling us we need to follow, as well as our own academic judgment. Yeah. And then there are also requirements that those professional regulatory bodies that are accrediting particular programs, it could be in psychology, it could be in law, it could be in accountancy, actuarial science. There are many of those external requirements that are placed on us as well.
Thank you so much for answering that. A lot of clarity on that. I think hopefully that answers the question for some students. I do have to apologize. Basically, my earring keeps hitting the mic, so I'm going to just take it off. I'm sure you can hear the little clicking. Just heard that. Love a bit of technical difficulties. It's fun. Okay, moving on to the next question. Now, each academic term, students are only allowed one set of counselling from student support and well-being. With the current cost of living crisis and mental health crisis, how do you plan to help students get the support they need throughout the whole academic year?
Yeah, so I think access to support and help is really important, and we can never completely plan for when people are going to need it. People don't just need help and support between 9 and 5 or Monday to Friday. Yeah. So I believe that we do provide a really good support service here at the University of Kent. We, of course, have feedback about where we can improve things, but our student support, wellbeing, mental health and counselling services are really high calibre, and we do get great feedback in terms of people who use them. There are challenges, though, in terms of how we can make sure that people get the support what they want when they need it. Yeah. So we have also, as well as the support delivered face-to-face through counselling, there is also access to 24/7 helplines that we offer. And whether that's an immediate sort of crisis need or a need that somebody has where it's not complete crisis, but there's something that actually they would like dealing with and don't want to necessarily feel they have to wait until there's a slot available for them through their central service. So we do try and make sure we've got that mix of face-to-face, online, accessible 24/7. I think that we would wish to continue working with yourselves and with students around how we can make sure that that support is there when people need it. We do have to though recognise that we can't provide everything that everybody wants all of the time, so we have to make some choices about what's available. Where we do have resource, though, we do make sure that we direct it to frontline student services and support. So that is an area where we want to make sure that we're continuing to invest, to make sure that our students are telling us what they need and what works, and try and think of ways that we can do that in ways that are not just accessible, but that are also sustainable.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much. And I think to highlight that point as well, it is our responsibility to bring that feedback forward. So if you have any feedback on how the mental health services and provisions here at Kent can be improved, how they can be bettered, please reach out to Kent Union, to myself or our Vice President of Welfare and Community, because they're the people that can bring it directly to students' support and well-being, as well as student services, to improve those services, especially with our work on the mental health charter as well. We really want to make sure that we're implementing the right provisions for students to support them throughout any crisis, throughout their normal academic years as well, because we know how difficult it can get at university. Like, life is hard when you come to uni, so you need to be able to actually get the support you need when you need it.
And I think, Zed, it's one of the things that none of us know what might trip us up. None of us know what might happen as you embark on a university career, because it's a whether it's a year postgrad program, a postgraduate research program, an undergraduate program, you're looking at 3 years worth of study. There will be life events that happen, as well as recognising that for many people, studying and living away from home, often for the first time. And it is about us trying to look at how we can respond to that in ways that are about helping people to manage through these things as well, so that they're also building up a set of skills that they have in order to be able to take those experiences and then use them in their future lives. And again, I think that's something that through the representation work that Kent Union does, and working with directly with course reps and directly with schools and divisions, that's something that we can also make sure it's not separate from the academic activity. It's absolutely part of it as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Karen. Moving on to the next question. So, can you give us an update on the ongoing UCU industrial action and where we are with negotiations, and if there's any further developments that have come out through the reballot as well?
So I absolutely acknowledge that there has been industrial action going on in the sector for probably about the last 5 years. Relates to pay, and it relates to working conditions, and it relates to pensions. Both trade unions and universities have been working through those issues. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't still differences, and that trade union members can absolutely choose to back a particular proposition that the trade union may be putting through that's on the back of what members are wanting, and those trade union members absolutely have the right to take action. We also then have to be able to mitigate and to manage that through both negotiating on the issues that have been raised as issues to negotiate on, which is pay and pensions. Let's just divide them into those two things. And also then to mitigate in terms of how we continue to support students through their studies, to make adjustments to their studies, to make sure that they can progress and also to graduate at the same time as maintaining those quality standards. We have been doing that throughout the past 5 years. And of course, we have to reflect on how we do that. But there are things that we've learnt over those years, that enable us to manage through those issues. I do not underestimate the impact and the upset that that has on students' experience. In terms of where we're currently at, there has been a period of strike days in at the beginning of the year. That mandate was coming to a close. The Universities and Colleges Union was reballoting, and that ballot closed and reported yesterday and today. There is another mandate that they have secured to take further industrial action. But there is currently now a ballot on what that might look like and how members can indicate to the trade union their choices over how they wish to progress at this point. There is a proposal on the table to continue with negotiations with the university via the Universities and Colleges Employers Association on a series of proposals around some of these issues to do with working conditions. That may be something that members choose to vote to do that and to then be able to progress and try and avoid industrial action where we can. But this is a very live situation. It is unfolding as I speak, so it may have changed from when I read this morning. But that's where we're at. We will continue to engage with yourselves and with our students here locally and to communicate what, if any, interventions we need to make in terms of supporting people's studies. And I recognise we're coming up to an exam period. And we will also continue to work with our local trade unions as well and continue with those relationships, continue to understand where people are coming from and look at how we can also locally manage through this as well.
100%. Thank you for that. I think it's really important to highlight that Kent students have seen industrial action for quite a few years and they've seen the impact of it. We've seen the impact of it. And it's that anxiety that comes from knowing that there are issues going on in your university. So can we get a commitment to ensure that there will be transparency and ongoing communications from the university with any updates that come from?
Yes, of course. And I think that what we have offered and have engaged in is the student forums. So that and these are led by Professor Richard Rees, who's the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Education and Student Experience. So he can also update students on not just what might be coming through in terms of just industrial action, but how he will work with colleagues and with students to make sure that if, as and when there is any action, we can mitigate to the best of our ability. We do have to, there are always local discussions that go on in terms of how local branches and local staff want to respond. And we try and maintain good relations through that. There are then the national discussions, which is where the negotiations are taking place. And we, of course, contribute to those where we can, but we're not the people doing the direct negotiating, the colleagues negotiating on our behalf.
Can I just ask you on that as well? At a national level, obviously, between the University College Employer Association, University's superannuation scheme, and UUK, how much influence does the University of Kent or yourself have on that as well?
I think we've got a voice because I am on the board of directors for Universities UK, so I can share what we at the University of Kent think, understand and know about these issues and the impact it's having. I also am a director with the Universities and Colleges Employers Association, so I can also share where we at the University of Kent are experiencing challenges, difficulties, or have suggestions for how we might be able to resolve these things. So we do have a voice. We do share with our trade union colleagues what we are talking about, where we can. Of course, recognising some of these things are confidential and have to be sometimes in terms of how things... but also absolutely where we can be open about these things, then we would wish to be. And I think that there is absolute merit in that, because I think where things are not talked through, then a vacuum is created and it gets filled with things that might not necessarily be what's happening, but what people have either heard or think is happening. So I do commit to endeavouring to making sure that where we can, we will absolutely be sharing things, and that we're committed as well to making sure that yourselves are up to speed, but also through you and directly with those students and course reps through our schools and divisions, that we're communicating directly with students.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Moving on, there are questions around the current restructures that are happening in the university. And I think there's a lot of information out there, a lot of disarray among students around what's going to happen with the future of their academic integrity in terms of, the quality of education and the staff that are teaching them. So someone asked, with another round of redundancies, further industrial action and staff being overstretched, will this negatively impact the quality of education at Kent and ultimately the university's reputation?
I have to say, this is probably one of the most volatile times in higher education that I've known. I'm sure there were more volatile volatile times, way back. So we seem to have, I don't often use the word perfect storm, but we do seem to have a number of issues that are coming together that are seriously impacting the sector and therefore the financial health and sustainability of all universities in the UK. Some universities are in different positions, but I would say I don't think there's any that are not experiencing some challenge in relation to the following. The fact that the fee has been frozen for the last 10 years, there was a slight up 5 years ago, but it's been pretty much the same since fees were introduced in 2012 at the 9,000 level. And I know fees are, not what people want to be talking about, but I'm explaining how it impacts universities. So we have, in effect, what's often referred to as a declining unit of resource. So £9,000 in 2012 is not worth the same as it
is now. Yes,
is now, which is a lot less. We have inflation at levels that haven't been seen for a long time. That is impacting on everything that the university does. So everything that we buy, our lighting, our heating, as it's impacting on individuals as well, in exactly the same. And of course, all of that means that all of our costs are increasing as well. So we have a situation where you can manage that for a while, and then you have to start to look at how do you manage your costs against your income when part of your income is remaining flat and your costs are rising. So some of the things we have to do are we have to be creative and innovative. So we have to look at how do we diversify our income. So that could be looking at how do we grow some of those areas where the University of Kent is strong, and there's also an opportunity to grow where students want to study those courses and programmes. We then have to look at different ways of offering our programmes. So we may be looking at online, we may be looking at a blended approach, we may be looking at work-based learning. So apprenticeships, for example, we have started offering higher and degree apprenticeships. They are funded slightly differently, but then they're an alternative source of funding. They're not an additional source of funding. We have to also diversify in terms of growing our international student numbers and our postgraduate taught student numbers as well. So trying to get diversified income genuinely helps. But we also have to look at our costs. The challenge the university's had for the last few years and others in the sector have had is that we've been spending more than we are earning. Had a plan for doing that because we've had some investments. We also recognise all of these changes mean that we have to adjust, and sometimes you need time to do that. But you cannot carry on like that. You start to deplete everything. So we have to take action in order to bring our costs in line so that they do not exceed our income. That has involved things like reorganising the university. Some of that, unfortunately, impacts areas where we're having to say we can no longer continue to deliver programmes in the same way or in particular places. And I know that the recent communication around the decision to stop delivering programmes in the future at the Brussels Centre is really upsetting. I completely understand that. It's within that context. I also understand that the work we've been doing around reshaping our arts and humanities at the university is also upsetting. But we have declining numbers of students studying those programmes. And that is on a trend over the last 10 years that's falling. And so we have to do something about it. And we have to manage courses we offer there, the staff cost base and the non-pay base as well that's there. And then on the professional services is another area where we're having to look at how do we run the university again in order to manage that cost base. These are really difficult decisions to make. Don't make them, you become an insolvent institution, and then we're here for anybody. I know that's quite a challenging statement to make, but it's the truth. And it's the governing body's responsibility and the university leadership and management responsibility. And we have a fiduciary duty to manage the university in a way that means that it is solvent and that it is sustainable so that we can uphold the commitments that we and that involves making some really, really difficult decisions. I just wanted to set that out as the context.
I appreciate that, honestly. Thank you.
In relation then to the impact on current staff and students, one of the things we always have to bear in mind when doing anything like this is where are the areas that we can invest to actually grow and where can we develop our income so that we can use that to make sure that staff and students are getting the support that they need. There's also taking the opportunity to say, actually, if we're having to reorganise some of this, if we're having to think about how we can take some costs out and maybe do it differently, how, by doing it differently, can we also address some of the things that people have been feeding back to us about the way that things might not be working as well as we would like? And some of that is sometimes we've got the resource in the wrong place. So actually, I think that part of what we're looking at as we review our professional services is making sure that academics have got the resources that they need, that our students have got the resources that they need, and we look at where we might be able to move it from elsewhere. Again, these are difficult decisions. That's what we're here to do. But that's where we then need to work with colleagues about the best way of doing that. So that's what we're currently engaged in at the moment. So when people hear us talking about the size and shape of the university, that's what we mean when we're saying that we're looking at the courses and the programmes that we offer, what are sustainable for us, what are the ones that are growing, where might they be contracting, how can we preserve and protect those as far as possible. But that might mean we can't do some things anymore. But it also means that there'll be other areas that are changing and growing and doing some things differently. And of course, you know, the university today doesn't look like it did in 1965 when it started off, I think, in a muddy field with 500 students. So this is part of the university's future development as well. And I think there are some really important discussions and debates going on around higher education at the moment in the UK. We need them to be more public. How do we fund a sustainable and appropriate and accessible higher education in the UK? What do people want? Is it student fees? Is it the taxpayer? Is it business? Is it employers? How do we make sure that we've got the right funding model? And at the moment, I don't believe that it is the right funding model. We've also got some things happening across the sector where we've got parts of it that are growing faster than others because there are no longer any student number caps, which then drives this big machinery around marketing and competition because everybody is competing for students. Everybody is competing to make sure they have enough income to make sure that they can pay the bills. And then you then have to start to I think, at some point step back and say, where is this going? how is this being managed and what does the future look like? There is, if I may, there's currently a House of Lords inquiry into the work of the Office for Students. It's slightly wider than that when you look at the parameters, and it talks about wanting feedback as well, not just on the regulatory aspects of the Office for Students, but also on the impact of the financial model that government has set out for universities and what impact that's having on universities. We have made a submission to that. We've raised many of these points. I'm very happy to share that with you, Zaid, and you can share that with students. We do, in that, say that there are certain things happening that are actually government policy that are impacting universities like Kent. We want that raised, we want it discussed, and we do recognise we have to, as an autonomous institution as well, which is very dear to us, we have to manage ourselves well. We can't just always be expecting somebody else to come in and rescue us. So we have a duty as well to manage our resources appropriately. But there are some things that are being put in place that make that very difficult. But yes, I will happily share that with you.
That would be wonderful.
Then you can use that as you will.
Thank you. We'll share that out to students so they can see that. I think this highlights a really important point. So government policy has led to the marketization of the whole higher education sector and marketization of universities. So do you think that's what's led to the point where now, back in the day, vice-chancellors weren't chief executives in a sense. They were,
it was a very different role.
So do you think that's where now your role comes in as kind of a chief executive officer?
Yes. It's a very different role, I think, to what would have been more of a kind of an academic figurehead. It's not to say they were sat around doing nothing. But I think that because of course the role is there to ultimately have that accountability, as I said, to external stakeholders as well as internal. I just think the requirements because of those changes of the role are different today than they would have been 20, 30 years ago.
Thank you so much for that. I am conscious of time, so I'll do...
sorry, am I
no
answering too long?
We'll do 2 more questions, and then there are the rest of the pre-submitted questions that we couldn't get through. We'll put up on the blog post with answers, and I'll pass this over to you. And then we'll get into audience questions. Thank you so much for bearing with us. I hope this has been useful to hear, and has been informative. I'll do a little fun question, then we'll go back to a serious question. The fun question actually was sent in, and I'm going to find it, bear with me. So, where's it gone? Oh, the University of Kent used to be home to a cat named Gandalf, once described as the postgraduate protector, bestower of academic blessing, a sassy sir, and a hunter of pigeons. Can we get another cat on campus?
So, I don't know that I ever met Gandalf.
He was a figurehead too.
Right, fine, okay. And I know at my previous university, there were also various university animals around the place. Unfortunately, at Nottingham, it tended to be more geese than cats.
And we have bunnies.
And we have rabbits here, don't we? So I don't think we're going to be rushing out and getting a university cat. But there is something I think that kind of reminds me of, and it is the importance of those rather wonderful stories that people have about organisations like universities. They are full of quirks and foibles, and when you've got long-standing organisations like universities, the University of Kent is 60 in 2025, which is fantastic. Other universities are younger, others are much older, but they are long-lasting institutions, and they are an important part of the fabric of this country, and they're an important part of the economic and social health of this country as well. And I say all of that then smiling in terms of, but there are lots of characters, lots of stories, lots of animals that are associated with universities, and Gandalf is one of ours, by the sounds of it.
It's the little things that make it.
It is, yes.
So I'll quickly go into audience questions now, and we'll also have the questions that have come through the live stream.
Great.
But first of all, it's really important to highlight, as you said earlier, the situation on closing the Brussels School of International Studies. And that decision has left a lot of students in dismay. We have a representative from the Brussels Graduate Students' Union, BGSU, summer. So if we can have the house lights on, that would be wonderful. And Ben will pass you the roaming mic, so you can have a chance to ask the question. Uh, yeah, so Shannon will be filming there. Um, the mic has a little camera as well, so they should all be able to hear you as well.
All right, great. Dear Vice-Chancellor Cox, dear Kent Union, dear student community, if everyone could please just give me 5 minutes of their time so I could lay the context for the question that I'll be asking. My
Oh,
summer.
sorry, bear with me. I think the mic's not on. We'll just quickly make sure it's speaking to it.
Hello?
Could you check, Ben? Thank you. That should still work. Yeah, that seems to be on. Yeah, that's on now. Sorry about that.
All right, great.
Summer, you
is
might
it
have
good?
to hold it quite close
Here,
to you. Yeah,
this works,
yeah, that's
okay.
better.
My name is Summer, and I'm here today to represent the student body at the University of Kent's Brussels School of International Studies. BSIS is a small yet intellectually robust postgraduate institution that specializes in international and law studies with a highly accomplished academic staff. If you're interested in learning about some of the esteemed components of my university, I would direct you to the BSIS website. However, that is no longer possible after the University of Kent erased a web page yesterday, wiping all information about me and my peers' courses and degrees. I'm here to represent the anguish and sheer disappointment of the master's and doctorate students who've been blindsided by top-down management in the form of a mass email to students and staff last Thursday afternoon. Imagine this. It's the last week of class at BSIS. Many of us are enduring the final days of writing our master's dissertations. Many of us are preparing to write our strenuous term papers. Then there are the doctorate students conducting their intensive research who've already invested countless hours into their projects. A very stressful time for all of us, to say the least. Now imagine this. Amid this hectic climate, on Thursday, March 30th at 2 p.m., the students and staff at BSIS received a cryptic, insensitive, and ambiguous email telling us that our university will be, quote, winding down its operations in Brussels from September 2023 and pursued to complete closure by spring of 2024. We did not see this coming. But what is even more appalling to us is neither did the administration and professors who were teaching us. In fact, there was simultaneously a class in progress where students and the professors alike were not aware that their work and study place has been terminated so abruptly. Less than 24 hours later, the Dean of Europe held a question and answer session where students asked endless questions about the future of our studies and degrees without receiving a single answer. It was painfully disappointing and, quite frankly, insulting to the integrity of our academic institution to receive a representative who is barely ever on BSIS grounds coming with a single patient with inadequate information. All of our questions and concerns were unanswered, and we were left only with empty promises of so-called support, which I'm seeing today is Kent's absolute favorite word, and absolute disregard for our student body, professors, and administrative staff. Us witnessed some of the most respected people, our peers and our professors, break down in front of us, having their lives changed in the span of one email. It was shocking, it was heartbreaking, and it was absolutely infuriating. University of Kent has failed to provide for the professors who've dedicated decades of their careers to BSIS, or the staff who have kept this institution alive. It is evident that BSIS was an easy target for Kent's financial cuts, as our professors were not allowed to unionize due to their limited number. Kent executives are falling short in their promises, or rather contractual obligations to us, to provide a standard of education that they're failing to honor. In fact, Kent has made the situation worse by deleting the website page where our courses are listed, thus making job applications difficult in case potential employees want to research information about BSIS. And now, despite making empty promises about having a concrete closure plan in place, not one representative from Canterbury has bothered to make the journey to Brussels and communicate this so-called plan with us. Vice-Chancellor, I ask you this. If I can travel 5 hours from Brussels to Canterbury, funded by the hundreds of euros of contributions from the very small BSIS community on a 24-hour notice, who, by the way, are all watching this right now, you and your colleagues cannot come to Brussels and address our questions and concerns. It is puzzling as to how our concerns were not already taken into consideration when University of Kent decided to shut down the operations of a 25-year-old campus, a community. Did you really expect us to be silent when our hard-earned degrees came under scrutiny? When the careers of our ever-caring professors and administration were abruptly terminated? Was BSIS just another financial statistic to you? Well, I'm here, and I'm just one of the many faces who are directly impacted by the financial ineptitude and decision-making in Canterbury. On behalf of the entire student body of Brussels School of International Studies, our dissatisfaction with the lack of information provided to us regarding the future of our master's and PhD degrees, we conclude that the best course of action for the university is to reverse its abrupt decision to shut down BSIS. Furthermore, we have not been given evidence that saving BSIS is impossible. In an email recently sent to the University of Kent, we clearly outline future action. We need you to know that BSIS is just a statistic of Kent's budget, or rather of financial mismanagement. But we are real people who have invested so much time and devotion towards our degrees. We need you to know that the wrongful treatment of BSIS is reflected on not only the integrity of BSIS, but the integrity of the entire University of Kent institution as a whole. We need our fellow Kent students to know that we have been cheated. If administration, like the Vice-Chancellor before us, paid just a little bit of attention to their campus in Brussels, they would recognize that this is an assault on a flourishing intellectual environment. The lack of transparency by the administration is alarming and beyond disrespectful. Let me be perfectly clear. The decision to close BSIS is a lazy, ignorant, and grave mistake. If you were to come to BSIS and listen to the bright ideas of students and faculty, perhaps you could be enlightened on a more rational alternative to this detrimental decision. And understand that BSIS is a true asset to Kent's name. Having an international politics and law school in the heart of Europe is no small feat. Not to mention the high quality of academia that is constantly being produced by students and professors. Do you know what you're giving up? Now you will find solutions to a myriad of other problems created by this closure, but no. You'd rather provide no legitimate system in place for this life-altering decision that you seem to care so little for. So, my question to you is, on behalf of all of the students of the Brussels School of International Studies, when can we finally receive the details of the high-level visits to the Brussels campus, including the attendees, timelines, and points of contact? We are eager to receive concrete answers regarding the future of our university. And I will be standing outside of the auditorium after today's session if anyone would like to discuss with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Summer. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. Ben can take the mic. It's really, really important to know that, we at Kent Union are here for you as well, and appreciate the emotion that came through that. So I'll pass it over to you, Karen, to answer
Yeah,
that.
thank you. Summer, thank you for your feedback. And I'm genuinely sorry for the decision that we've had to make. And as we have communicated with your colleagues that are representing you, we have already committed to do a similar event to the one we're running right now in Brussels with students, so that we can do a similar thing around asking questions. said in the message that I've three messages I've already sent about when we'll be able to do that. I will follow up again after this session, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you after this session as well. I've also got to make sure that I've got the right colleagues with us and that we've able to get everything set up so that it will be meaningful and purposeful. So I absolutely commit, as I did in that message that I've sent to you all, that we will be doing that. I'm hoping we can do it in the week of the 17th of April, but I need to make sure that we're able to set that up appropriately and properly and to communicate with students as well so that they know the date, the time, the event, the nature of that and can prepare as well. So I've already committed to that. I think as well, just to say that my executive group colleagues that have visited the campus last week and senior academic colleagues that are there today are also have been part of the decision making, but are also hugely regretful of where we've had to get to. I recognise that doesn't take away any of the anger or the pain. And I also recognise that as we've already committed to, we have a duty to those staff who are there to make sure that we work with them through their contracts and that we have a duty to make sure that students studying there are able to appropriately complete studies, and that is what we will do. I recognise at this point none of that will take anything away from how all of you feel about it. I'm very happy to, as I say, to have a conversation with you afterwards, and we will do a similar event at the Brussels campus in the centre as soon as we can, hopefully the week of 17th of April. I hope that's helpful for now, but I recognise that there's nothing that I can say to you at this point. Of course, people are feeling that will appease or make any of this feel any better at this point.
Thank you for that, Summer.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And hopefully that's an adequate answer for the people from Brussels watching as well. And we'll work with you as well to ensure that this event takes place and that the students in Brussels get the answers that they deserve and that they need, and that they have the resource and the support. And myself and Ben, the Vice President of Postgraduate Experience, pledged to that as well. So thank you. Moving on to audience questions, I'll quickly move to online questions and I'll open it up to you guys here. So we had a question online that said, yesterday students received an email about an upcoming marking and assessment boycott and that it will not affect the progression of degrees or finishing our degrees. How is this so?
So that would have been with reference to the industrial action that we've been talking about before. It is so that students are both informed of what's possible, and then we can start to work through how we work with students, with yourselves, with the course reps, as we would normally do, to make sure that we put things in place so that people can progress studies. As I've said, we've been doing this for the last few years. Marking and assessment boycotts are particularly challenging, and we would want to work both locally and nationally to try and negotiate to make sure that we're not in that position. It is something that is harder to manage. I'm not denying that, and I'm not denying the impact that it has on students as well. But it is something that we absolutely commit to look into.
Thank you so much. And for anyone who may be concerned about the market assessment boycott that may be coming up, industrial action, any questions, please go to our strike page on the Kent Union website. That can have all the information, will be updated regularly as well. And if you have any questions, please email us or the Vice President of Academic Experience as well with any industrial action queries. So thank you. And another question online was, with regards to reviewing the offer at Kent in terms of the courses and the modules, how will this affect smaller courses? Because there's certain subjects at Kent that are top 10 in the country, but still getting heavy cuts.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's really difficult. None of this is about quality. It is about what's sustainable and what's affordable. And I hear the anger around that. But again, if we can't afford something. We have to do something about it. Um, and, and that is the unfortunate reality of the situation that we are in. We do have to, though, look at this in the round. We've always been having to look at numbers on programmes and courses. Modules sometimes don't run for particular periods of time. Sometimes they're not run again because they're just not popular in terms of students choosing them. And it's the same with our courses. So we do have a process that the university is constantly working its way through, of annually looking at courses, course review. Will we be running this? How are we going to deliver a programme if we stop a module, for example?
Yeah.
So that is part and parcel of our regular activity. I think, though, that we have to also recognise that sometimes by saying we're not going to run a course doesn't mean to say we're not going to have a subject area. It just may be we're doing something different. We might have a pathway through a particular set of programmes. We might have a particular disciplinary expertise that's contributing elsewhere. So we will absolutely always look to what we need to do, of course, to be sustainable, but we'll also want to make sure where we can we're preserving and protecting. I've always said and have a commitment to trying to make sure that we are preserving as many jobs as possible. For us, compulsory redundancies is an absolute last resort. And we have a set of commitments around redundancy avoidance. So all of that is feeding into our decision making about what we're offering, what we're reviewing, how we're offering it, and what we have to stop, and what we might be able to do.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. So now that's all my online questions. I will open it up to the floor. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hands, and one of my lovely officers will come over with a roaming mic. Anyone? Oh, we have. Okay. Just here, and then we'll go over to you, and then back to you, sir. Yeah.
They're just going to turn on?
Yes, it's on.
Hi, Karen. Thank you for sitting down with us and having this really transparent conversation. I think obviously we're not normally going to get to meet someone as high up as you at the university, so thank you. I'm Brooke. I'm a second year film studies student. Now, I completely appreciate that it's not under the university's control if the UCU chooses to strike, and how they go about striking, again, is not your decision. In first year, I missed lots of really important lectures due to the strikes, one of which, for example, was about film genre, and I would consider genre quite a big part of film studies. I'm quite worried that I will be graduating not knowing about film genre, for example, and many other really important parts of my degree. And I can imagine for students in other courses, they've also missed really important chunks of knowledge due to the strikes. Is it within your negotiations right now, or can it be part of your negotiations to get that knowledge restored, to get the lecture slides released or the readings released? And if they can't be, will we be reimbursed in another way, perhaps financially? Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
No, thank you for the question, and important, because it's not just. I think you raise it quite nicely as this impacts everybody. So where there's missing content, and then the compensation piece. So on the missing content, I think, and many of our UCU members would also try and mitigate this as well. So we'd try and make sure that material was available, that things were released after action has been taken, that other colleagues are working through this and supporting as well. So I think if there are particular things that students feel they're still not getting, whether it's slides haven't been released or reading material hasn't been released, and we've been and for whatever reason you feel the university hasn't mitigated that, then I think that would be something that we would need to have raised directly, whether it's through Kent Union or whether it's through Professor Richard Rees as the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Education Student Experience, so that we can look at that and look at what we can do. I mean, I think you're right to flag there are some things that would be seen as core. There are other things that in some courses it appears and others it doesn't. So I think there's always a judgment to be made about what does need to be covered and mitigated for. But you raise a really good a really good question. And there may be occasions where we have to be completely honest and transparent and say, in this case, we can't deliver you the like for like. This is what we will do instead. But the main thing is to have the conversation and for people to understand what's happening. On the compensation, there isn't an automatic kind of compensatory system for strike happens, this happens. We've engaged in goodwill payments, and I know that hasn't necessarily always been what students were wanting or expecting, because as we withhold salaries for strike days undertaken, and then we distribute that, whether that's back to students as goodwill or whether that's working with Kent Union around what would be important things that students want to invest those funds in. But divided up amongst lots of students, it adds up to token gestures. I recognise that. I think you have every right to avail yourself of complaints procedures and also seeking redress, monetary redress, through all of the routes that are available, right through to the Office of the Independent Adjudicator. I think we're transparent about what those complaints processes are. If that's not clear, again, we'll work to make sure that it is. But we would want to try and have a conversation around how can we understand and mitigate rather than going through that route. But as with colleagues being free to take strike action, students are free to take action in their own decisions around all of that as well.
Thank you for that. I hope that answers the question. And just to highlight as well, it's really, if you have missed any classes or anything, or if you have certain bits of your academic experience that were impacted, please use the academic experience reporting tool on the Kent Union website. That was developed for those specific situations, so we can see what situations pop up and then give you a targeted response on what to do or what's the best route, best course of action to deal with that situation, whether it be trying to get that information back or going through the complaints procedure routes and providing you that information. That's available on the Kent Union website. If you want to get the link and stuff, please DM us. We can send you the link straight away as well. Yeah, thank you. And next we had you over here in the silver jacket. If you could also please introduce yourself with your, either one. If you could introduce yourself, your name and the course you do, that would be great as well.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a third year Culture and Media Studies student. I don't know what else there is to say about me, but yeah. I think what I would like to sort of say, maybe not so much as direct questions, but I think what is disheartening as students is that we sort of get spoken about these decisions, etc., finances and whatever, and it really just feels like you're talking to us as if it is a business, which obviously we understand in some sense it is, but it kind of disregards us as students and the fact that we are here to learn and have an academic experience. So if you are to look at us as customers, what has been quite hard is obviously the strikes, but along with that, I'm now in my third year. I also did a year at a different university, so I was straight in there during the COVID pandemic, got sent home from that university. I was living in London. We actually got reimbursed for our accommodation. And then when we come here, obviously lockdowns happen again. And then it kind of just that year finished and we didn't really get any more talk about the students that were affected from COVID. We were told to come here. You know, I'm from South East London. I technically could have stayed at home with everything being online. We came, we were then in lockdowns. I was sitting in Parkwood, not leaving campus for like 2 months. Wintertime, not the best. And it just never really has been brought up since. Then obviously strikes and stuff like that. So as we are your customers, you are a business. You have not delivered to us. Where is our compensation? Further, with the shutdown of the Brussels branch, it kind of just shows that the academic experience of students isn't as valued as much as what we bring to you financially. Whether that is obviously issues with government policies, etc., there isn't that transparency. You know, we are talked about as if this is a business, our lecturers who we are in contact with, who we really respect and learn so much from, we know that they are struggling with more work administration roles and etc. And it does affect us. With strikes, I have actually been in the process of doing my ethics application for my dissertation, which still hasn't been approved because it's been hard to contact my convener, and I do not blame him at all because he also works at the Margate School. He runs a lot of modules, so I don't put the blame on him at all. So now I'm in a situation where I've got 1 month to my dissertation. I obviously am working on it, but my ethics application is also delayed. So it really does affect us, and I feel like there isn't that recognition there. In ways that could be, yes, compensation, addressing the issues about COVID, addressing the fact that our degrees were affected and we have not had the same quality of degrees that we are paying for. But also things like we only get a week extension. I went to another university, like I said, there it was normal to get a month extension if you have issues, personal issues, issues with strikes. Sometimes a week isn't enough, especially on courses that have a lot of deadlines that are really squashed together. That hasn't really been addressed throughout the year. So from, I'd say, COVID to now, I don't feel like there's been any address on this, any sort of change, any visible change, and also the tone that this has all been addressed in has just felt so businesslike, which is disheartening personally, and I think to all students as well, the fact that we are here for an academic experience and to enjoy education, to just be seen as customers. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Appreciate
no,
it.
I think it's important. I hear what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. There's a real tension between, the university is on the one hand a business and has to be business-like, and on the other hand needs to be constantly vigilant about trying to and striving to uphold all of its academic integrity and all of its, if you like, the sort of the essence of what university is about, and those two things are in constant tension. And your point about are we, on the one hand, students here to have that academic and life enhancing and life transforming often experience, or are we customers? And again, it's both those things, and it's in tension. So I think, I sit here and I don't have all the answers to all of the things that you've raised, and I think you kindly phrased it as I've got some comments, not just questions. But I am hearing what you're saying, and I think it's often helpful to have the mirror held up, and we have to recognise that you as students are also experiencing those tensions that we as, whether we're leaders, academics, professional services colleagues, are also experiencing them as well. If there are particular things that you feel haven't been addressed post-COVID, then we would want to understand what they were and what we could then look to do about them. So I would encourage you to, whether it's through Kent Union or after this, to raise those issues, and then we can respond directly if there and see what the particular things are that we might be able to address, not just necessarily for yourself, but that also then help us think about what we might need to do for wider student community. I do recognise that COVID was incredibly horrible and disruptive for students and staff and the country, and that people were trying to respond to, 1 minute it was everybody home, the next minute it was back on campus, and really challenging. Your point about reimbursement of rents, I'll take that away, because I know we did a lot of that, a lot of reimbursing of rental accommodation. And so again, I just want to check some of those things out. But if there are particular things, I'm very happy to take those away and to engage.
Thank you for that question. Really appreciate it. I think it's important to highlight that the pandemic, even though it feels like it was years ago, the impact is still going on day to day. We see it with the way students are interacting. We see it with the way, people are learning, people are socializing, and it's important to shift the way we work and shift the way we approach things at the union, but also at the university, to make sure those students are supported, or have the right landscape in the higher education sector, and really have the resources needed to thrive here. And we'll continue to strive for that too. So if you have any direct feedback, please do get in touch with me or anyone at Kent Union. We'll bring that up, definitely.
I think, if I may say, just to follow up from what you said, COVID has had a significant impact, particularly for those students who were caught in those 2 years where it was study in your bedroom, and then come back onto campus. And actually we've seen, and other universities have seen, a significant dropout of students actually not completing studies. We've been trying to look at how we can support students to come back, but some of it is the transition from online to face to face, and can we continue to do some of that remote study as well? So again, these are all things that we've been trying to grapple with and look at how we can best support. But you're right, there's more ongoing issues than necessarily just it's all done and dusted and finished.
I hope that helps answer a little bit.
I feel like me and many other people, what the situation was, we came back to campus, we were in a lockdown. People got their rent room back.
Right.
We were forced to sort of stay here. And alongside of that, it meant that essentially I lived on campus for a year and had absolutely zero benefit. I'd say apart from study hall.
Yeah.
That was the only place I'd go. Every place closed, restaurants closed,
Mhm.
etc. So it's more those sort of facilities that doesn't necessarily reflect on, oh yeah, we stayed here, we did use your facility.
Completely
okay.
hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll get an answer
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Getting the right people in there. Thank you. And we have one more question up there. Should be on. Yeah.
Good
If you could
afternoon.
introduce yourself.
My name is Junaid. I'm studying an MSc in Business Analytics with a placement year, and I'm an international student. To start with, it has to do with the experience of being an international student at the University of Kent. It's been quite challenging. The initial challenge starts with coming from a different country, and on arrival, you are pretty much rushed into trying to settle in, trying to understand how things work in the society as a whole, especially if you live off campus. And the biggest challenge is the course content and the modules, because the way it's structured is different from what you're used to. And if you don't know how to keep up or catch up with how it is in the UK, it becomes a problem because you can't match the standards. You are on the back foot, and there is not enough support from my experience and from a couple of other people I've spoken to that introduces you to what is expected of you as a person, what is expected from your reports, what is expected from your attendance and all of that. And I think this really needs to be looked at if you're going to enhance the quality of the international student experience, because you have just 1 year to make a difference, to learn. Now, the second thing has to do with placements. Now, one of the attractions to some of the courses that are taken offered in this school has to do with the placement opportunity. And you realize that it's when you get in here that you're told you have to go seek your placement by yourself. And the job market and the academic experience are not the same thing. And while I appreciate the fact that there's support to a degree, it's not totally adequate. I'd rather be prepared from where I'm coming from, knowing fully well that the placement is my responsibility, and accept it, and come in knowing I'm going to school, and I'm also looking for a job. I need to know what the employment cycle is like. I need to know what the CVs entail, what the recruitment process is. I need all that information before coming in, and I don't want to be bombarded by having to attend classes and at the same time having to look for a job, having to attend assessments. it's a lot of pressure, and you don't have enough preparation before you get to the University of Kent, because while I understand that a lot of people talk about being treated like customers, I see spending my money as an investment. And education is an investment where I believe I should get a return on an investment. And if it's not, I need to decide where I'm going to take my money to. So looking at this whole experience, it's lacking from my perspective. And I think it does need some work for the future students that will be coming here.
Thank you so much for that, Junaid. Some really good points. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your experiences, and we need to capture that. First of all, look at how we can help you in the situation that you're in, and make sure that those things have been addressed as far as possible. But also, I think, take the feedback and look at how we are making sure that, particularly international students, and you're right, there is a huge, often kind of, just kind of cultural differences, ways of doing things. You don't know the system, or so completely understand all of that. So how do we better support both before you arrive here and also then once you are here? So I think that's something that we can absolutely take away. Just sorry, which is it? The business school?
Business analytics.
Yes, it is business school. To be honest, over half of my class, over 3/4 of my class, they're all internationals.
Right.
And I know they're all experiencing similar
Same
challenges.
thing. Okay.
I think
Fine,
this
we'll take that way.
paints a wider picture of what the landscape is like for international students in general in the UK as well. It is very hard to integrate into a society, into the education system here as an international student. It is difficult to find a job when people don't want to hire international students on the basis of their visa, their work hour limits, all of those things. And that is work that we need to do together to be able to ensure that international students have the kind of catered support that they need to be able to thrive here. We know that international students are a growing market. We know they're going to be coming here to the University of Kent. This is a global university from the get-go, and we need to be able to support them. So we'll be doing a lot of work from our end, but also with the university to ensure that that support is in place. And the person you're sitting next to as well will be helping in that too. So hopefully we'll be able to improve that experience as well for yourself or for other future international students as well. So thank you for raising those points. Does anyone have any other? Oh, this is wonderful. So I'll go here and then go up to you guys and then to you, and we'll move around. But while that mic is coming down, I'll quickly have an online question as well, so you can go after that online question, and it is around salaries. As expected. So the university is currently going through financial difficulties. How do you justify your salary when it is 6 times over the average salary in the UK of 33,000?
Yeah, there are always questions about senior colleagues' salaries and the differences, and I think that for me, there is absolutely something that one has to be humble about and have humility about in terms of the rates of pay that these jobs have associated with them. I do not set my own salary. I was offered my salary when I joined the university 5.5 years ago. I have never taken any additional awards or uplifts. I'm already well paid. I gift to the university to support students, student hardship, and I've also taken salary reductions when COVID was hit. And I'm not saying that to kind of, to say anything other than I absolutely recognise that I am well paid, and I also am wanting to make sure that what we're doing and what we're working towards with our own staff is to make sure that they're also fairly and well paid, and that we're supporting our students to go into the careers that they want to, so that they can also have work and a livelihood. So I recognise that salaries can become a bit of a lightning rod. But as I say, there are separate governance processes around salaries that are set in universities and in other areas as well, and that's how mine is determined.
Thank you for that honesty. And I think it's important because the transparency behind salaries of senior members of the university is very limited. So I think students need to know kind of, where that comes from, and what the responsibilities are and why you get paid that, and especially the fact that you haven't taken that pay rise or anything and had that pay reduction. It's important for students to know. So thank you for being honest about that. I'll pass it over to you, Tony.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Would you like to
Hi.
introduce yourself as well?
My name's Tony. I'm a postgraduate criminology student. I study on the Canterbury campus, and I did my undergrad in criminal justice and criminology with EM professional practice. I did that on the Medway campus.
Right.
So I've been here relatively as long as you have, and I think my main point is that I want to be proud of the university I go to. So my question to you is, how would you separate the University of Kent from Russell Group universities? And then when I got here, I believe we were 44th on the league table, but I now think that we're like 48th or something. So how do you plan to boost us on the league tables?
Yeah. No, there are two bits, I think, to your question. There's the league table question, and then there was the bit about the Russell Group. I'll come back to that in a minute. So yeah, league tables are important because they're an external reference tool that prospective students look at when they're making decisions about university study. They're not necessarily the first thing that they'll go to, but it does often become part of that decision making. League tables are also can be challenged in terms of we don't want to be just chasing the league table. So I think we need to be thoughtful about actually what are the league tables reflecting, and in the main, particularly the national league tables, they're actually reflecting student satisfaction, and so a lot of that is to do with student feedback, particularly around overall satisfaction with their course. Assessment and feedback is a big part of that. Access to learning resources and support. There's also another element to often in those tables around graduate outcomes. And there are other things, but they're often they're less weighted, as it were. Those are the sort of big things that are included. And research can sometimes be in those tables and not. Where we've got a challenge is trying to maintain all of that all the time, so people do go up and down in the league tables. We do want to be higher up in those tables. I think that that is probably a reflection of where we both see ourselves and where our students see us, but also sometimes we also have to accept that students and outcomes are feeding back things that are meaning we've got some work to do to work with our students around feedback on their programmes, assessment and feedback, and supporting them into those the work and graduate jobs that they want to. So I suppose that's a roundabout way of saying league tables are important for people making choices. We want to make sure we're projecting as good an account of the University of Kent as possible, but we also have to recognise that they're also telling us things that we need to take account of. So we do review the NSS National Student Survey data every year very closely. Our schools and divisions look at the feedback. I think there have been quite significant changes on the back of that, particularly in relation to some of the issues around feedback, but there is still more work to do on feedback in particular. It is one of the things that we know comes up constantly, whether it's examinations, whether it's feedback throughout the year, whether it's the way people are assessed and criteria. It is one of the things where, of course, individuals are very clear. They want more information, want more clarity, and they want more feedback. So I think for me, that's what league tables is important for, is telling us what we need to do more of. But we need to do it by working closely with yourselves and with Kent Union as well. Can you just unpack a little bit more what you mean about what the question is in relation to the Russell Group issue?
how do you plan to separate us from Russell Group universities? Because obviously they have the status of being a Russell Group,
Yeah.
and we are just the University of Kent. So what separates us?
Yes. Okay. So the Russell Group itself is interesting in that it is a self-appointed group of universities. They're great universities, but they have become over the years to represent a particular place in the sector because of the way they're also both promoted in terms of being big and research intensive, which is very positive. But it's also the way that they've been embedded into school performance as well. So schools are judged on not just the number of students that go to university, but also the number that go to Russell Group. We would argue that is not a fair way of judging success because universities like Kent also offer a fantastic opportunity for students who don't necessarily want to go to a big city, who don't necessarily want to go to a big research intensive university where you can often end up getting kind of lost in big classes and in environments where actually there is an enhanced focus on research rather than education. So I think for me, we have to work really hard about promoting why come to Kent. What is it that we can offer that others can't? And I think some of it is that supportive environment. We do get good feedback around students who are often first in family to university, who are wanting an environment where it's high quality, but they can also feel that they're supported throughout their studies as well. So I think there's some of the differentiators. Sometimes it's down to we're on a wonderful campus here. Medway is very different. I think it's about us positioning that as it is an area of urban regeneration. It's working with other universities as well. It's different. I think the main thing is being really clear what we offer and why, and then of course we've got to live up to that. I think the other thing that's important for us is to be talking with students like yourselves about why did you choose Kent? Has it lived up to what you hoped and wished for? Why have you stayed on? What could we do better? I don't think we are so kind of that we believe we're so perfect we couldn't do better. Absolutely we can, and we can only do that if we hear from yourselves. So I think that's how we have to start to, and have been having to position the University of Kent and universities like Kent that are not in this Russell Group. But it's become incredible. I mean, it really has become something that driving both student choice and employers, and actually it's a self-selected group and a self-appointed group, and that's fine, but we have to work out ways of being able to respond to that.
And it fits into that whole marketization of the higher education sector. It is, if you've done business, you know, it is creating conglomerates. It is creating those relationships and taking the biggest market share. And it's just how it is that when we talk about it like a business as well, the Russell Group do take up a lot of that. I was originally going to go to a Russell Group, chose to come to Kent instead. Just because it wasn't what I wanted in my life. I wanted, as you said, a smaller campus, a more kind of focused education, and that's probably why I stayed on, still here 5 years down the line. But I am conscious of time. Thank you for the answer. I can take 3 more questions from the audience. So, okay. So we'll go back up there, and then to you guys, and then to you in the middle.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ben. I'm a politics and international relations student. This is a bit of a personal question for you, Karen. So, at the beginning, you styled yourself as sort of responsible for and accountable to the organization of the university. Now, in recent years, obviously, we've seen a lot of criticism from both students and staff. We've seen it just now, actually. Really heavy cuts being made to pretty vital departments, such as admin resource support, and large numbers of redundancies. I'm quoting from a newspaper here, but it's evident that the Organizing for Success program, I think it's called, is similar to something you've attempted to do during your time at Nottingham University. Now, they had to apologize for that because it went wrong. In your time as Vice-Chancellor, have you ever questioned whether you're the right person for the job still? Thank you.
Every day. And this isn't to have any sympathy. These are difficult times and difficult jobs. You made reference to my time at the University of Nottingham. I was, with others, part of a big IT change programme that also involved people and it also involved processes. And it was a really, really difficult change project. And there were things that went well and other things that didn't go as well. And I think one has to accept when one is managing an organisation, managing change, managing anything, whether it's 3 people or 300,000 people, that there will be some things that go well and some things that don't go as well. For me, it's then about how do you learn from that and how do you take that forward. I think anybody sitting in a leadership role, whether it's as Vice-Chancellor or whether it's a head of school or whether it's a Kent Union President, if you stop asking yourself the question of am I doing the right things, am I living up to my values, am I behaving in ways that I believe in, am I upholding my own integrity? I think if you stop asking those questions, then it probably is time to step away. But yes, I question it every day. Am I the right person? Am I doing the right things? Have I got the right team? Have I called that right? Yeah, it's not something that I just sit here and think, oh, that's easy, that's fine, I can just go home. And I go home, I worry, and I hold that as well. I have to hold those things. I have to look at how can I work with the team, how can I work with stakeholders to try and strive to be better. There may come a time when I decide that this isn't right for me, or I'm not right for the university, or the university decides I'm not right for it either. And one then has to step away with dignity. So yes, it's difficult. I don't expect any sympathy for that. Like colleagues have already said, I am well paid. I applied for the job and I have the job. I'm appraised every year and I have feedback, and some of that is really challenging. However, I also really believe in the university. I believe in staff and students, and I'm proud of the university. We are in challenging times, as I've said, but that's no excuse for not still being able to carry on with respect and dignity and integrity. And that's what I strive to do every day. And yes, sometimes I fall short. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that honesty, Karen. Appreciate it. And I think before I came into the position, obviously, I was also one of the students who would question these things and about university management. Then you get to speak to these people. And this is why I wanted to have this platform, to really give that open space for students to directly ask questions to the people in charge at the university, just like we have in our scrutiny panels as officers. You get asked these questions from students and from the people you represent. These jobs are not 9 to 5 jobs, even though that's what you work. It's 24/7. You worry about things, you take things home, you think about things through and through, because your job isn't just one specific issue. It is everything that's going on, and it can get really challenging. It can get really tough, but we fight through it because we care, because we genuinely want to see this university improve and get better day by day. And I can guarantee you, every single stakeholder I've met, every single executive group member I met, they genuinely do care about the university. They aren't just here because it's a job. They could go to many other universities, as we've mentioned, Russell groups, where it could be better, but they stay here because it's important to them to see the university get better and to see that grow. And I challenge them on a daily basis to ensure that happens from a student perspective. Every feedback we get as officers, we bring forward because it's important. That's how you make change, by closing that feedback loop. So I just wanted to raise that as well. So thank you. We have a question here and then a question in the middle, and I'm sorry, that's all I'll be able to take, unfortunately.
Hiya, my name's Lulu. I'm a second year liberal arts student. I did just want to say thank you again for taking part in this. It's really nice to have a connection between students and higher management, because sometimes when you're at a big university, it can be difficult to know exactly which departments to contact.
Yeah.
And sometimes the wheels of that bureaucratic system are very slow. So it's nice to get some FaceTime. So thank you for doing this. Now, basically, I'm a second year, so I only joined at the tail end of the main phase of the COVID situation. Obviously, we're still living in a COVID situation. Now, whilst I don't want online lectures, and I don't think actually anyone wants online lectures, especially when you're paying for them, when I joined, the university had what I would call a commitment to the concept of blended learning. So that was the fact that things would be taking place in person again, but we would be using the kind of digital skills and literacies that we had learned. And actually, COVID in some ways was hailed as a good thing because, or rather, what we'd learned from it would be. Sorry, obviously, COVID wasn't.
COVID not great.
Retract that
Understand what you
immediately.
mean. Understand what you mean.
But yeah, what I mean is that this allowed there to be strives for inclusivity and accessibility, especially in the fact that lectures were recorded, they were hosted on Kent Vision, they're archived in Moodle, so you can even access ones from last year, and also you could take part on Teams. The Teams thing was successful to an extent, but I think it depended on the technical literacy of your own lecturer, which was mixed, and also like the size of your cohort, etc. But one thing that was really helpful was lectures being recorded. Now, this commitment to blended learning seems to have trickled out as things have gone, in quotation marks, back to normal. It seems to be completely optional to lecturers whether they record lectures and then put them online at all. Especially in arts, hums, and HSS subjects, I feel, where we have lexems. Now, basically, it varies between courses, schools, and even just lecturers, whether they choose to do that or not. I mean, last year, which was my first year, which was right on the tail end of COVID, it was actually in a film module I was taking. The lecturers were not recorded, and the slides were also not made available. And I felt that this was quite uninclusive and inaccessible, especially for people who may have additional educational needs, and also just may not be able to type as fast or for a variety of reasons. I emailed the lecturer and the course convener and I was told, no, that's just not how they operate it. And I wasn't given any kind of way to debate that. Now, essentially what my long-winded question is asking is, can the university actually commit to a blanket and uniform stance on whether, it is required for lectures to be recorded for the sake of accessibility and inclusivity, and regardless of division? And secondly to that, will this actually be enforced?
Thank you, Lulu. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Christian. I thought we already had that stance, but obviously it's not playing through. So then that comes to your second point. Well, then how do we enforce that? I think just a few things around it. It may be that there have been some decisions made about what kinds of activity are recorded. So I think you mentioned seminars, and there may be some things that are not easy to record if people are moving around, walking around, whatever. So I can understand that, but we do have a stance that standard lectures should be recorded and therefore are then accessible for students to use at any point, should be available on Moodle. They're part of helpful for revision. It's helpful if you couldn't make a class, all of those good things. So I will take that away and look at where we've got to on that in terms of what information we've got about what is and isn't happening. I can also pick that up directly with my colleagues who I meet every week and can then ask them to be looking at this in their divisions and schools as well, so that we can then come back to you with a response on that.
Thank you. I think Lupe wants to add something as well.
Yeah, I don't know if this is working. I can just shout.
Oh, it is now.
Amazing. I guess just to add to answer Karen as well, this is something that's covered by Kent Inclusive Practices, which is something that I'm working on at the moment, to refresh it and relaunch it. Kent Inclusive Practices is this policy that was outlined by the university and agreed by the university a few years ago. And it outlines all the activities that every single lecturer, module convener should be doing in order to make education as accessible as possible. And it covers things like recording every single lecture, like ensuring that slides are released ahead of time so people got time to read them and make sure that they understand them before they go to the actual teaching hours and teaching events. There's a whole web page on the university's website around Kent Inclusive Practices, what they mean, what they should be doing. And like I said, this is a policy that's supposed to be compulsory and mandatory for every single teaching activity at the university. It's just not being followed. Sometimes the message will come from top down and it just will not trickle down effectively to everyone, but that's what we are trying to fix. And to get commitment from people at an individual level at the university to take part in Kent Inclusive Practices and to put them at the forefront of everything. But as many students as possible that know about this, the more people that can be aware of, actually, you're not following the university's policy. Let me point you in the direction of the website that says that you're supposed to be doing this. And I think that's a great thing that individuals can do with the lecturers, is just show them what they're supposed to be doing if you know that it exists. So yeah, I think it's a lot of work on awareness about that as well.
Thank you for that. And please do put this into the academic experience reporting tool too, if you find that. It's really important to highlight that so we can then find out where the areas of issue are so we can target that support there. And yeah, thank you. Great question. And then we have the final question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Molly. I'm a third-year wildlife conservation student. A bit nervous, so bear with me. And I'm aware of the time, so I'll try and be quick.
Thank you.
There you go. So I've been looking into animal testing that happens at the University of Kent, and I wasn't aware that it happened here, but I found out it did. And I went on the website to try and find out more, and it's really lacking in information. So I contacted a charity called Animal Aid, and they got in contact with me and they told me all the data about the data that the University of Kent has actually provided to them under the freedom of data. And on the website of Kent, it does state in 2019 that only 6 mice were tested on. However, in the data given by the University of Kent to Animal Aid, there were 289 mice tested on. And this is just like 1 year. For example, 2017, it was 476. And in a world where like we're kind of moving on from animal testing, there's innovative ways of doing research now. Will the university, make a statement and move on from this? Because I feel like using animals in testing, you're not setting the students up in science for like the future that's coming, because we're moving away from that as a whole. So I'm just curious to know if there's like talk about it or anything like that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Molly.
No,
I think that
thanks
feeds into a
for the
question.
And we'll follow up about the discrepancy in terms of what we're actually publicly saying, and that must reflect what is actually happening. And so I apologise for that. I am aware we do some very limited testing. I know that any testing for some people is too much testing. So completely hear what you're saying. We, though, do pretty limited testing. As I understand it, it's in areas where it's particular disease types and there is no alternative. I'm absolutely sure that the researchers that we have here at the University of Kent, if there was an alternative, would be using it. I will take away what you've raised and I will pick that up with our lead for the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation. We'll look at this website issue, and I know my colleague Tim up there has probably written it down just to have a look at. Again, we'll share some more information about what we are doing, why, and whether there are alternatives or not, and if there are, what we're going to do about moving towards using them. I hope that, I appreciate for some people that is not enough, completely understand, but if we commit to getting that back to you, I hope that at least will give you the information that you're looking for.
Thank you. and it's that transparency again, and
Yeah,
it's really
yeah,
important.
yeah.
So thank you for raising that. That brings us to the end of the questions. I know there are still some questions that are unanswered. So if the audience have any questions, please refer yourself to my colleague over there in the white. He'll write down the questions, and we can take that back and get those answered and put that in the blog post. I know we had some online questions as well that haven't been answered yet. We'll also take that back, write down the answers for that, and post on the blog online. And we'll share the link of all of that on our social media, on our Instagrams, everything. So please keep an eye out. And I hope this has been useful. I would love to do this again on an annual basis so we can, bring back that transparency.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I think
No,
it's a
no,
really
it's
good
fine.
forum
Yeah,
to
yeah,
have.
yeah, yeah.
I'd like to give a huge thank you to the team at Kent Union, who's
Yeah,
been really
thank you.
helpful in organizing this for us to be able to give students this platform. And a massive thank you to the team at the Gulbenkian as well for arranging this space, and the tech side, Kent Tech as well. Really appreciate all your help. And thank you, Karen, for
No,
actually
not at all.
coming
Thank
down
you.
to this and being part of this. So thank you.
No, thank you.
And a massive, massive thank you to all the students who've been a part of this, bringing in questions and really taking this space and using it for the purpose it's meant to. And everyone watching online as well, thank you. And I hope it's helped. Thank you so much.
Thank you.